Hi children, it's Grandma Carla with more of Abby's Quest for Treasure. This is chapter 2. As the wagon drove into the clearing where the ranch house was located, Uncle Samuel sat up stiffly. Blazes! What is it, Uncle Samuel? Abby asked, stunned by his outburst. She followed his gaze to the front porch, where a large black stallion was tied. Uncle Samuel slapped the reins impatiently against Petunia's hindquarters, and she broke into a fast trot. Boris Rasmussen, that's what. Abby had heard the name before. He was an overseer on a nearby ranch. At the porch steps, Samuel reined in the horse. Luke, take care of the wagon, he ordered as he leapt off the seat and started up the porch steps. He almost ran into a tall, muscular man who was just emerging through the door. In a flash, Abby noted the difference between skinny Uncle Samuel's features and Rasmussen's wide chest, heavy work boots, and commanding presence. How nice to see you, Samuel, the man spoke, with a German accent. But the way his lips curled into a snarl, Abby knew that he hadn't meant the words. She climbed from the wagon in time to see anger spreading across Uncle Samuel's face. Rasmussen, what do you want? Uncle Sam stood his ground on the porch. Just came by to make a friendly call. Yeah, met the Fraulein, Mrs. Kendall. She offered me tea. I'm sure if she'd have the supplies, she would have offered more. The man set his widely brimmed hat on his head and stared arrogantly at Uncle Samuel. But I know you've had troubles, Samuel. Rasmussen swept his hand around the yard. The corral empty except for 4 chickens scratching in the dirt. Obviously, the ranch isn't producing. Maybe if you hadn't spent the last few years collecting birds' nests. He cackled at his own brand of humor and then sobered. But these things have a way of righting themselves. What do you mean? Uncle Samuel sounded wary. What I mean is this place will become profitable after I buy it. Samuel exploded. This is my place. You can't do that. Oh, I can, and you know it. All this belongs to the king, and he could take it back any time he wanted. Abby found his calm voice unnerving, as if he feared nothing, as if Rasmussen were used to getting his own way. But now, with this great mahal, he continued, anyone can buy property from the king and receive permanent ownership papers. Rasmussen's large hand strayed onto his hip and rested on the hilt of the whip that hung from his belt. Samuel's eyes narrowed as he took an aggressive step toward the larger man. Why, you dirty, low-down, swindling... Suddenly, Pa barreled through the front door. He gripped his brother by the arm and shoved him out of Rasmussen's way. Let the man by, Samuel. There's no sense discussing it. Abby saw Pa's face tighten and his jaw clench. Rasmussen smirked and walked lightly down the steps, the whip bouncing against his hip. Good day, gents, he said as he brushed by Abby as if she just weren't there, and mounted his horse. The leather creaked under his weight as he jerked the dark stallion around and spurred it into a gallop. Uncle Samuel broke loose from Pa and stormed to the other side of the porch. The man's a cheat. Everyone knows it. Last year he stole Josiah Winston's sugar profits in a dirty game of cards. And I've seen the bloody backs he's given some field workers. I don't like him. Pa stalked over to his brother. I don't like him either, Samuel. But he intends to take your ranch. We've got to find a way to get that money before he does. Abby watched in horror as Pa sank down onto the porch railing and rested his head on his hands. The image of Pa's hopelessness burned into her mind. Just then Ma bustled out to the porch. It's time for you children to come inside and wash up for dinner. She hurried Sarah and Abby through the door and shut it behind her. Your pa needs to talk with Samuel alone, she explained, and you need to set the table. The girls followed her toward the kitchen. Looking out the front room's one window, Abby saw Luke leading the horse into the barn. Then she turned back to the kitchen. After washing her hands in a bucket, she picked up a stack of dinner plates and took them to the table. Ma and Sarah were setting out the forks and the knives. Abby only heard snippets of their conversation. "Ma," Sarah said in a tattletale tone, "Abby forgot her sunbonnet again today. She's going to get more freckles." "Shh, Sarah. It's not nice to tell." Abby didn't hear the rest. Her mind was far away. Her heart was thrumming wildly as she wrestled with the decision. "It's up to me. Rasmussen will steal our home unless I get that gold. I've got to leave soon." Then she corrected herself. "We've got to leave soon." Certainly Luke would be eager for adventure. But she swallowed hard. "Can I do it, God? It will take hours of hiking to search for the treasure. Will my legs make it? Even from our short walk today, my legs are so tired. If only I didn't have Ma's weak legs," she lamented. "But I have no choice." The evening meal was quiet. Abby washed up the dinner dishes and Luke dried while Ma kneaded bread dough on the kitchen table with an unusual zeal. Maybe Ma's imagining it's Boris Rasmussen's face, thought Abby. The front door of the ranch house stood open, drawing moths to the lantern that lit the room. A cool breeze wafted in and rustled the outside trees, giving them soft music to work by. "Luke," Abby whispered as she handed him another chipped plate, "we've got to talk later tonight and make important plans." "What plans?" His eyebrows shot up in a question. Abby nodded at her mother, who had punched down her loaf for the last time and was setting it in the bread pan to rise. "Shh." Luke's green eyes sparkled. "A secret?" "What do you say, Luke?" Ma's eyed them as she carried the pan to the stove. Abby and Luke exchanged glances. "We were discussing plans for the night, Ma. Do you think we could get Uncle Samuel to play his guitar again?" Ma wiped her floured hands on her apron. "I'm sure he could be coaxed. It'd be especially good to hear music tonight." She pushed a hairpin in at the nape of her neck and untied her apron. "After I trim his hair, we can sit outside where the breeze can reach us." "Great idea." Abby dried her hands on the kitchen towel and grabbed Luke's hand as he set down the last dish. "Come on." They hurried out the door in search of her uncle, who was just returning from the barn with Sarah on his shoulders. "Uncle Samuel, would you play your guitar for us tonight?" Abby hoped he'd give in. Ever since the afternoon, her mind had been buzzing with questions about Lanai, the site of the buried treasure, but she didn't know much about the distant island, only that it lay close to Maui. "It's about time we lighten the mood," Uncle Samuel answered, "but your ma promised to shear some of this sheep's wool off my head. First things first." He scrubbed his salt and pepper beard absently. "As soon as that's done, we'll have a serenade. Luke and Abby, why don't you build a fire pit and we'll sing under the stars?" Everyone scattered to hurry the evening along. By the time Abby and Luke returned from the woodpile and began building a fire, Ma, Sarah, and Pa were watching Uncle Samuel lather up his bearded face in the front porch. Uncle Samuel stared into the mirror that dangled from one of the wooden posts. "Now, Charlotte," he said, "I don't want to look like a newborn lamb. Just a trim will do." Ma wagged her finger at him. "Samuel, you look like a shaggy wolf. I'm going to make you presentable to society again." Uncle Samuel winced, but Ma didn't back down. "Sit here, and I'll try to perform a minor miracle." Sarah perched on the porch railing and patted his shoulder for comfort. "I'm right here, Uncle. Don't be scared." "You'll love me no matter what I look like?" He looked into her young face. Sarah placed her palm on his lathered whiskers. "Always," she said solemnly, her blue eyes round and kind. She wiped off the lather on Samuel's dusty shirt. Abby and Luke gathered around as Pa sharpened the straight-edge razor on a leather strap. When finished, he handed the shiny instrument to Ma, who took it and tilted Samuel's head back. Don't move, Samuel, or I could take off more than I mean to." In a few short minutes, Ma had whisked away Uncle Samuel's beard, but she'd left mutton chop whiskers. Then she took up her sewing shears and began to trim the unkempt hair hanging over his ears and collars. "I declare, Samuel, you might look like a scientist yet," she said brightly as she removed the rag he'd tied around his neck. "Go wash, and let's see what we've done." Uncle Samuel hurried away to the horse trough and dunked his whole head in. "It feels good, Charlotte. Half a year's growth gone." When he tromped back, dripping wet, Ma dried him off with a towel and combed his hair, parting it properly down the side. "Take a gander in the mirror and tell me how you like it," she urged. Uncle Samuel whistled into the dim glass. "I do clean up nice, don't I?" He was teasing them, Abby knew, so she went over to curtsy in front of him. "Oh, kind and handsome sir, may I have this waltz?" Sarah giggled from the sidelines as Uncle Samuel gallantly swept Abby into a waltz. To music he began to hum. After Sarah and Abby had each taken a turn around the porch, they all headed down to the blazing fire. Pa had spread out burlap sacks to sit on, and each found a spot. Abby sat next to Uncle Samuel and across the pit from Luke. When Samuel picked up his battered guitar, everyone hushed expectantly. Then he began strumming a lively tune about a Molokai princess who loved the son of a sailor man. As they clapped to the rousing beat, the evening flew by. Soon the fire began to burn low, and Sarah snuggled sleepily into Pa's arms, which meant the night was drawing to a close. But Abby had not yet gotten the answers she sought. "Uncle Samuel, you've lived a long time in the Sandwich Islands," Abby began. "Have you ever been to the island of Lanai?" Uncle Samuel turned toward her, surprised. As he looked into her eyes, Abby held her breath. Did he suspect her plans? "I've never been there myself," he finally said, "but I've talked to folks who visited. The name Lanai means Day of Conquest." He rubbed his chin smooth. "It's aptly named. Some say that the island is haunted." Luke sat up from where he'd been listening intently. "Haunted?" he asked. "Yes, 70 years ago the island people were murdered by warriors from the Big Island. No one survived the massacre. Some say Lanai is haunted by the ghost of those who were never properly laid to rest." Goosebumps instantly rose up Abby's arms, and the night turned eerie. "Do you know how the Hawaiians bury their dead?" Uncle Samuel asked. Abby could see the lecture coming. Heading it off, she asked, "Do you think it's haunted, Uncle Samuel?" "As a Christian, I don't have to worry about those things," Uncle Samuel said confidently. "Greater is he who is in me than he who is in the world." He patted Abby on the back and smiled. "Why this sudden interest in Lanai, the tiny red island?" "Ah, well," Abby's gaze veered to Luke, hoping he'd come to her rescue. But it was Pa who sighed and rose to his feet with Sarah asleep in his arms. "Enough chatter for now." He turned to Samuel. "We've got to rise early if we want to hunt wild pigs and bring home the bacon. It's time we all get to bed." Sarah sighed and tucked her head under Pa's chin. Pa nuzzled her. "Luke, would you knock out the fire so we don't have to worry about flying sparks?" "Yes, sir." Luke jumped up and reached for a stick. "I'll collect the burlap sacks, Pa, and then be right to bed," Abby volunteered. Ma came over and gave Abby a hug. "Come to bed soon, love. There's book work in the morning. We can't let our lessons fall behind just because we live far from civilization." Ma and Uncle Samuel followed Pa. Abby waited for their boots to sound on the porch steps before she moved towards Luke. "It's time," Abby announced breathlessly. "For bed?" he asked, brushing a lock off his forehead. "No, you goose. It's time to go after the buried treasure. You know, the map." He shot her a knowing look. "So that's why you were asking about Lanai. I thought you'd forgotten about it." For a second she saw excitement blaze in his eyes, but then he sobered and bent to stir the campfire. Abby picked up a burlap sack. I didn't want to leave, But my parents need that treasure, and Uncle Sam needs to buy the ranch before that wicked Rasmussen does. The firelight danced across her face. Luke, they're out of money. Luke grimaced and then stared out into the dark Kukua forest. What? Abby demanded. Are you afraid because Lanny is supposed to be haunted? Luke snorted. No, I know God helped us last time, but I don't want to put your parents through more worry. It was my fault they thought you were lost at sea. I'm not eager to give them a reason to... Finally, he pushed a hand through his straight hair and sat bluntly. I'm trying to make myself useful around here. Luke, my parents love you. You don't have to earn that. I know, but if my aunt writes, it's going to be hard for them to keep me here. He sighed heavily. I've been expecting a letter all month. Abby saw sadness in his eyes and her heart softened. But don't you see? If we get that gold, we'll save the ranch. You can't get any more useful than that. She took his cold hand in hers. I've got it all figured out. We'll catch a ride to Maui. Maybe Alani knows a sea captain in Kailua who can help us. From Maui, we can get a ride to Lanai, and then we follow the map. We'll only be gone 2 weeks. What could go wrong? Luke stared at her, open-mouthed. We could get caught in another mutiny. That's not likely, she shot back. And then, seeing that Luke was not convinced, she squeezed his hand. Luke, we've got to get that money before Rasmussen takes our ranch. I know, he said, resigned. I want to help. Eating 3 meals a day makes me feel guilty, and I'm always hungry. He exhaled and threw down his stick. All right, we'll go. How soon do you want to leave? How about tonight? Tonight? Luke wrinkled his face in distaste. Don't you think it'd be better to get a good start in the morning after breakfast? Your ma's going to have bread baking at sunrise. She shook her head. I know you love warm bread, but we'll bring crackers and some of those hard-boiled eggs. I have a few cents I brought from California, just enough for bread. Once we get the gold, we'll buy all the supplies we need. More chickens, apples, and lots of ribbon candy. She grinned at him. But one thing's for sure. We've got to be gone before Pa rises to go hunting. Luke crossed his arms. I'm not going unless you leave a note. I don't want your parents worrying again. It's a deal, she said, holding out her hand to him. When they shook, Abby sighed with relief. Luke was coming with her. Together they could accomplish anything, and it wouldn't be long before they returned with enough money, gold, for everything they needed. I'll tap on your window in 4 hours, he said, as he headed toward the bunk in the barn, where he'd transformed the tack room into his own private place. Thanks. Abby picked up the last burlap sack and started for the ranch house. She was already imagining Uncle Samuel unfurling a deed of ownership in Boris Rasmussen's unpleasant face. The man would stomp away, angry and defeated. Sweet Uncle Samuel will never have to worry again, she thought as she climbed the porch steps. Setting down the burlap sack, she imagined Pa's eyes bugging out when she and Luke lugged home a chest of gold. They'd set it right here on the porch. Then Pa would grab her in a victory hug and gaze down at her with pride shining in his blue eyes. As she headed toward the straw-tick mattress she and Sarah shared, Abby realized a weight had been lifted from her heart. Snuggling next to her sister, she closed her eyes and thought, this is going to work out perfectly. I hope so. This is Grandma Carla, and that was Chapter 2 of Abby, Quest for Treasure.